Welcome everyone to the webinar. We're going to get started in the next few minutes. We still have folks joining us right now. But in the meantime, we'd love it if you all would share where you're calling in from. Just look for the chat in your side panel. Let us know where you're calling in from. I'm here in Atlanta. We're hunkered down with the storms and the hurricane right now. Where else is everybody calling in from? Just look for the chat there. And we'll get started in about a minute once everybody's had a chance to join the call today. We've got Cary, North Carolina. Welcome, Taylor. Who else do we have joining us today? If you like, you're just joining. We'll get started in just a minute. If you want to drop in the questions where you're calling in from today, we'd love to hear where you're at. And hopefully anyone that's in the Southeast, you're safe and hunkered down with Helena going on. We've got Charleston, West Virginia, Akron, Ohio, Brooklyn, New York. All right. East Coast, we got Midwest, Louisiana, Cincinnati, Columbus. More North Carolina, Nebraska. Wonderful. Omaha. Going out west again, we got someone joining us from Arizona. Welcome, everyone. So glad that you're here with us today. Well, it looks like most folks have trickled in. So welcome to today's webinar, From Knowledge to Action, Enhance Policy Training with PowerRecall. Today, my name's Christina Cook. I'm the Director of Product Marketing here, and today we're joined by Abhishek Murali and Robin Gifford. Abhishek, why don't you introduce yourself to the audience and give them a bit of your background working with the Power products.
Thank you, Christina. Hi, everyone. My name is Abhishek, Abhi. I've been with RDMS for 6+ years, a bunch of different roles. Previously, I led PowerPolicy and PowerLine. I'm really excited to talk to you all about PowerRecall today. And then I'll hand it over to Robin Gifford, who's the product marketing manager for Recall.
Hey everybody, nice to see you. There may be some faces out there that recognize me from being your CSM. So if I used to be in customer success, I spent about 2.5 years there and then came over to product marketing back in February. But prior to that, I have over 25 years in public service. Now, most of that was in public safety. So I have about 4 years of emergency management, 16 years in law enforcement. And that includes 911, being a sworn police officer, and on the administrative side. In the administrative side, the last 6 years I spent as the policy manager and the Power DMS master administrator for the Arkansas State Police. So I'm pretty familiar with the nuances that you face with policy and training and how important that is to you.
Fantastic. Thank you both for introducing yourselves. And just a reminder to everyone, if you have questions, put them in the chat. We'll have a Q&A at the end. Looking forward to answering any questions. But a little bit what we're going to cover today, we're going to talk about some of the challenges you all face when it comes to training and retention of training. And then Abhishek's going to take us through the science of learning. There's actually a lot of interesting science in how we learn faster, retain information. And then we're going to take you through a demo of PowerRecall. And finally, Robin's going to talk through different ways that customers have been using Recall, including different use cases of how they can apply it in their environment. And then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Abhishek and Robin.
Well, thank you, Christina, and thanks everybody for joining us today. I'm really excited to talk to you about PowerRecall. And to just kick it off, I want to talk a little bit about the background and the challenges that you have with learning policies today. So on the next slide, we're going to talk about some different areas. And one of those is that when you are getting your policies, procedures, and other documents that are job critical out to your employees, there's a different ways that you may do that. You know, one way, maybe less now than it used to be, is you rely on your supervisors or maybe higher ranking officers or employees to actually share that information. The problem with that is it can lack consistency with different personnel, and you really can't prove comprehension. It doesn't give you a report or anything to show that you've completed a task. And so that's one way. The way that probably most people have gone to is reading and signing for a policy. Now, some of you may be doing that on paper, but recall works with PowerPolicy really well. So what's really cool is when you read and sign for a policy, you have that initial acknowledgement, you have proof of distribution, and that's really important, especially if you're seeking accreditation or some type of certification or something along those lines. You may be completing a training course, and that's an important step as well. The thing is, you have to have a refresher because people forget, right? They go through training, they remember it for a time, and then they forget. And so you've got to reinforce that. And the issue with the training course typically is going to be, it's the same for everybody across the board. So they may already know it well, but they still have to repeat that training course annually. And then finally, maybe with a training course or maybe without, maybe just when you distribute a policy, they're taking a quiz or a test over that content. And in that moment in time, you can prove that they could pass that test, right? But you can't really prove that they committed it to long-term memory. So on the next slide, I want to take a little poll and find out from you, what are some challenges that you face today with policy comprehension? So select one of those. If you choose other, I'd ask if you would put that in the chat. So maybe it's just analytics, maybe you have one size fits all cycles, you can't customize, maybe reviews and tests because you can't really guarantee comprehension there. Maybe you're lacking time and energy and effort and maybe just personnel, because we know that's a struggle just to deliver that training content, or maybe it's something completely different. So if you would share that in the chat with us, I would love to see that. All right, we'll give you just another little bit. All right. So that's interesting. It looks like lack of time to create and deliver training content was the primary thing. And I know that that's a struggle in the public safety realm because recruitment and retention is so difficult, right? So having the right personnel to be able to do that. Christina, was there anything interesting that popped in the chat?
I'm taking a look now. I see just a comment that the dispatchers have to do the training on the floor because of short staffing.
Right, exactly. No, I completely understand that. Yeah, you just don't have that personnel to substitute in there, so that's completely understandable. All right, well, thank you guys for sharing that with me. I really appreciate it. It's really good to know kind of that what we think is happening is actually what you're facing today. And so as we move on, Abhishek is actually going to take over and he's going to talk a little bit more about some of those technical aspects, the science behind learning, and then you're going to get a demo. So Abhi, take it away.
Thank you, Robin. Well, I know we all know this, but the human mind is fascinatingly complex, especially when it comes to how we retain information. Understanding the science of how we learn is crucial to developing effective training programs to make sure that people retain the information you want them to learn and remember. With memory, research shows that our brains consolidate information better when it's repeated across several days rather than through one-time learning. This gradual reinforcement helps embed the information more deeply into memory. And we all know this. So imagine when you're trying to learn a new language, most recommendation is practice a few vocabulary words repeatedly over several weeks. You're more likely to remember them instead of trying to cram them all in a single session. One of the reasons that this technique actually works is because of how the information is stored in the first place. In short-term memory, information is often stored for a brief period, often just a few seconds or minutes. For information to move into long-term memory, it requires sustained repeated exposure. So think about learning a new phone number. So initially, you might need to repeat it several times over the years. And I know this example, like we don't actually remember phone numbers, our phones do it for us. But when we used to, and I know we've all had this experience, that with regular use, some of these numbers became really back of mind for us, and we don't really think about them much anymore. However, all of this only works if information is stored efficiently, and efficiency in learning is really about optimizing how and when we retrieve this information to use later. So we know that weekly review sessions leading up to a big exam are more beneficial than a single intensive session the day before. This spreading out of learning helps solidify the memory into material into memory. And last but not the least is just how we manage cognitive load. We know that there's no value in learning new information when we're feeling overwhelmed, because it's really hard for us to keep track of that. So instead of studying for hours without a break, actually actively breaking down information into smaller study chunks and then reviewing that more frequently results in better processing and retention. So this is a little bit about sort of how the memory works, how brain retention works. And these concepts will be helpful as we look at this next slide, which talks about a key scientific principle called as the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So when it comes to the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve, you'll notice in this nice graph that this demonstrates how quickly we forget information if there are no attempts made to retain it. So immediately after learning something, retention's high. But without reinforcement, our memory of the information declines rapidly over time. So for example, suppose your team undergoes policy training today. Imagine this curve starting at 100%, we learn something new. And then within a day or two, without any review of that information, it drops to around 60%. They're only able to remember 60% of what they learned. After about a week, this comes to as low as 30% without being able to actively retrieve that information. This demonstrates the necessity for reinforcing learning to combat this forgetting curve. In the next slide, we'll look at a specific technique that solves this problem called spaced repetition. And spaced repetition is really a way to combat the natural decline of information as new information is stored. What it really proposes at a super high level is that timely reviews of information will keep the information fresh in our minds. And it significantly boosts long-term retention by moving that information from short to long-term memory. There's a few key concepts, and all of this will play out as I give through a demo through the product. But at a really high level, the first piece is active recall. So instead of just rereading a policy once a year or once every 6 months, it's actually valuable to apply that policy through the form of a quiz, through summarizing that information, and that strengthens the neural connections to remember that information. Confidence ratings is a way for the users to indicate how confident they feel about this material, and the spaced repetition recommends that information that you're less familiar with should be reviewed more often than information that you're more familiar with, thereby distributing the workload and managing that cognitive load. Adaptive scheduling really talks about how if you find certain policies challenging, we should schedule more frequent reviews of that policy. And if you're really comfortable and really familiar with other information, you need less reviews. So it effectively allocates where you're spending your time, targeting ones that you're less familiar with, and focusing more on items that you're more familiar with. Spaced repetition combines these elements of active recall, confidence ratings, spacing out reviews, and adaptive scheduling to create a comprehensive and effective learning approach. This ensures that information that they learn not only moves from short-term memory to long-term memory, but it can be immediately recalled when the seconds count, when they're in the real world.
Yeah, Abby, I think of this, instead of reviewing policies once a year, if you're actually doing that learning over time throughout the year and how much better that would improve that long-term memory, I think this is really cool. And I can see such a need for this in public safety, government, and education. You're always having to remember new things and your brain just feels overloaded. So having a way to bring that up periodically, I think is really going to be a game changer.
Absolutely, and it is broad applicability across a lot of spaces, but especially as you mentioned, Robin, for public safety, where critical information needs to be retrieved immediately and in real time.
Absolutely.
As we move into the next slide, you'll look at sort of at a high level how PowerRecall works. But really excited to bring this product to you and talk a little bit about the demo of how this product works. But at its core, PowerRecall, in the next slide, you'll see that it's a solution, or it's an add-on solution for your existing PowerPolicy product. It lives right inside your PowerPolicy product. It enhances policy comprehension, allowing admins to create training flashcards from existing policies through the use of AI. So one of the poll questions we asked was just what were some of the biggest challenges? And creating this training content is hard. Like not all of us are super creative. It becomes a burden if you have to create a variety of different questions. So one of the things we want to help solve for is that you can use AI to create a better set of questions and then review them and move them out to your users. You can create topical decks where you can assign these to your existing users and groups that are already in your PowerDMS site. Each learner receives a personalized learning path that's specific to their roles. And at the end of the day, real-time analytics helps you understand if comprehension's on track, if it's improving over time, and where the gaps might be, and how you might want to surface and provide remedial training to address them.
Abby, I think what's interesting is, we in the old days, right, we used to have a series of flashcards and we had to write those out manually, right? So you had your front and your back and you would, test yourself. And then once you learned something and felt pretty confident, you'd move it into the stack that you know, right? And then the stack that you didn't quite know as well, you'd continue reviewing that until you felt comfortable and could kind of answer those questions. What I really like is this is going to build the cards for the employees. Like this builds it for them. And I think of what a time saver this is going to be for people. I'm just so excited about it.
Me too, Robin. Me too. Let's move to the next slide, and I want to share a demo of how the product works so you can get a really good sense of where does it live, how does it work, and how would you create these training decks and cards. I'll start this experience kind of from the PowerDMS homepage. Now, let's begin by navigating to PowerRecall. So Recall lives as another icon at the bottom of your icon set in your main navigation. Clicking on this icon will load PowerRecall homepage right inside your PowerDMS site. You'll land in all decks, and you can see that I've created a variety of different decks. And decks are really topical subjects that you can create to enforce, to really understand and measure and improve comprehension on specific topics. This decks component is incredibly flexible, so you can create decks on a particular policy, you can create decks across multiple policies, you can create decks specifically for supervisors. So really any way that you would like to in terms of leveraging the system to suit your needs and make sure it works for you. In this particular example, I'm going to create a training deck called Promotional Exam that's focused on supervisors within the department. In order to do that, you can very easily go into New Deck, type in the name of the deck, and just like that, you've created a new deck and you can add cards into it. Now, once created, adding cards is pretty straightforward. Click on the new card icon. At any point in this process, you can always add cards manually. You can do that by choosing the cards manually here or in a bunch of other places. One of our core values was just making sure that it's really flexible and make sure that you can use it the way you want to within your organization. But in this case, let's see how the AI service helps us create cards much faster. Now, I have a policy that's already in my file cabinet called safety protocols, and I want to create some training decks on the safety protocols dedicated to supervisors. So I'm going to pull in that policy, and as you can see, when I pull it in, it pulls in the latest publication automatically without me needing to choose what's the active version and where I need to create the cards. Now, once the cards have been pulled in, there's a couple of ways you can add cards with AI. You can very simply click on this Generate Cards button and select the deck you want to put this in and choose the number of cards that you want to create. The system will automatically figure out different paragraphs and lines in this policy and generate a series of questions in a draft status. Now, the real magic of this product is really being able to specifically highlight as a paragraph or a text and say, I want to generate cards on this section. There's a lot of content in this policy. Not everything is relevant to everybody. I'm creating a deck for supervisors. So I want to pick the supervisor section of this policy and then generate cards through the use of AI. Just like before, it's a really straightforward process for me to select the area, pick the deck, and generate X number of cards. And within 15 to 20 seconds, it'll automatically generate these cards and present them to you. Now, while this is generating, I want to show you how some of these cards are going to look. Now, not only can you see the cards that have been generated through the use of AI, you can also look at the individual card and change everything about this card. You can change the question, the answer choices, the correct answers. You can add more options. You can really change everything. And at the end of the day, if you're like, I generally like this question, but I don't like the choices, you can just tell the AI to give you another one. And just like that, it's going to run through the program again and generate a new question for you right inside the app. And it's basically taken that same component, produced a different version of the same question, so you can look at if this is something that might better suit your needs. Once the questions are generated, another really, and our team was so proud of being able to deliver this, is really being able to tie the specific question to the exact line of your policy that it's coming from. Now, you can either click on the policy and tell you which question came from this particular paragraph. Alternatively, you can also do this by clicking on the card, and it'll reinforce which particular line of the policy yields this card. Now, all cards are created automatically in draft status because AI is good, but it is not perfect. And we do want to make sure that you have complete control over what is the information coming out of your policies that your end users will see. When you're ready and you've made the changes you would like to make, you can very easily publish this card, making it available to all of your end users. Now, we talked a little bit about highlighting, we talked a little bit about editing and publishing. Next, we'll look at, once you've created it and published it, how would you get this out to your employees? Now I'm going to go back to the deck, and you can see here there is a document viewer view where you can see the cards right side by side with the content, but there's also just a flat list view. So you can see, well, how many cards are available in this deck? What does the card say? Do I want to make changes to it? Do I want to archive it? And when you're ready with everything in this deck, it's very similar to policies, very similar to how folders and documents work. You can easily go into assignments, find any user or group that's already in your site. And as I mentioned, my goal with this is to assign it to a supervisor group that I've already created. And I also want to assign it to the division commander group or division leader group. And just like that, within 4 to 5 minutes, you're able to select particular policies, highlight particular areas, generate a sequence of cards, and then publish them, get them out to your users. There really are no limits in terms of how many cards you can create, how many decks you can have, and we really want to make sure the system is incredibly flexible for you to achieve the different outcomes. And last but not the least, very similar to folders and policies, you can bring in other department leaders, individuals who are interested in generating these programs, to give them access to security rights to your decks, so they can actually create more content from other policies that are available. If you have any questions, I'm going to move into the test taking experience, but please post any questions you have in the chat, and we would love to sort of answer them as we go through the rest of this demo.
Abhi, one of the questions that we get a lot of times when people are looking at recall is, how accurate is it? What am I looking at here? And so the thing that's important to mention is it's not going to be 100% accurate like a human would create that question, but it is pretty darn good. And what you have to do in any type of training is you have to do an accuracy check, right? So what we're finding is they're really just having to go in, and most questions are fine as is, but sometimes they want to ask it a little differently or make a minor tweak. And just keep in mind, all training material really should be reviewed and approved before you distribute to employees. And this is the same with PowerRecall. So definitely want to give it a check over, make sure everything looks correct, and do that before you send the training out. But yes, it does really well, but it cannot be 100% accurate, just like a human is not 100% accurate.
Very well said, Robin. And we would like to say 99%, but I think one of the reasons we have built this capability is that nothing goes out without an admin's approval, is really to make sure that we never miss that 1%. Wonderful. Now, we've taken a look at what it feels like to create a deck. And as I mentioned, you can create as many decks as you'd like, create cards, assign them, and get them out to your end users. Now, what does the end user actually see? Now, we're just like PowerDMS and PowerDMS tasks today, recall is going to be another task on their homepage. It's going to appear on their homepage. It's going to show up in their inbox. And if they use the mobile app, they can take these cards on the mobile app. With the end user experience, we want to make sure we understand that employees have a lot on their plates. And adding another task might seem daunting. That's why recall allows you to control not only the frequency, how often these cards show up for your end users, but also the number of cards that will appear. Admins can go into recall and use the settings menu to say, hey, I want cards to appear daily or weekly or at another schedule that works for you. And I need them to do 5 to 10 cards once a week for them to maintain this comprehension. And really making sure that we're not burdening them with additional responsibilities, but really providing them with a way to keep up that comprehension at a rate and without making them feel overwhelmed. When the task notification appears, when they get started, they can take a look at how many cards have been selected for them to appear today. Across all the cards that are available, we'll randomly select the number that you set as an admin to show up on any given day. And when they hit get started, each question is shown one at a time. Now, the system automatically generates a variety of different questions, all the way from basic to intermediate questions. And this is an example of a scenario-based questions. Admins don't have to do anything additional. When they select the content and say, AI, generate some questions for me, we're automatically bringing a variety of different questions to the deck. Now, they can review this question, pick the correct answer, and respond. Now, I'm not super familiar with this material, but I got it wrong. But that's okay, because the goal of this is continuous learning and to help them understand what was the right answer at the end of the day. Now, this whole process, going back to the spaced repetition concept, reinforces the concept of active recall, right? It's not just enough to move short-term memory to long-term memory to reread that policy. It's also important to take a quiz and answer the question and see if you know the answer to the question while you're reviewing this material. Now, you didn't know this today, but that's perfectly okay. The adaptive scheduling component of spaced repetition and the recall product will surface this question again in the future based on your confidence of how well do you think you remember this information, and when did you last review it. Now, I got both of these wrong. I'm realizing that I might not have read this policy really well. So immediately, once they get the question wrong, they have a way to bring up that policy. And I think one thing we are very proud of to be able to provide is the ability for them to automatically get to the exact highlight that this question came from. Gone are the days where they have to see where this question is coming from, which part of the policy articulates it, and the system will automatically bring them to that specific area where they can take that information. Now, at the end of the day, we do provide search right inside the document experience. If it's a really long document, or if you want to just kind of look at other information, you can do this just like you would in your Power DMS. Once they're gone through the 4 questions that we were asked to do today and provide that rating, we are able to sort of publish a great way of helping them understand sort of where their comprehension lies. Now, I don't use this site very much, and this is an internal site, but these numbers from early customers are generally very high because a lot of this material is already known to your users because they're reading those policies. But while they review this, we also present what decks are you looking at, overall, how are you performing, and really provide a way to encourage them to understand their comprehension at any point that they would like to. And of course, as we get into analytics, you'll see more about how admins can look at it. But one key area I want to show here is the recall score. The recall score is a proprietary score we've developed to help you at any given moment in time measure the comprehension across a specific knowledge topic. So in this context, across promotional decks, your recall score might be high. Across a different topic, it might be low. And admins and end users over time will get to learn where they might be lacking and where additional training might be spent. And the last part of this demo is I'm going to move into the reporting aspect of PowerRecall. But I do want to stop and see if anybody has any questions. Please put them in the chat before we move on to the next section.
We've got a lot of great questions, but Robin, go ahead before I jump in.
Oh, no, I was just going to say it is really awesome to see a product that really is focused on the learner. So they're able to see their score, they're able to give feedback on how well they remembered it, and you're going to get a lot of really good data. And what is so important is being able to hone that training. So when you have an in-person training, you can't cover everything, right? So knowing those specific areas where there may be some weaknesses, I think is so important to be able to bring that out in training. So I'm excited to see this.
Yeah, and one thing I also want to mention around the training is just all the questions are personalized. So different people with the same assignment will see different sets of questions on a given day. And this is just to make sure that we are individually understanding through that personalized journey who might need support. And all the answer choices for a given question are randomized across individual users. And that's really to promote honest and accurate reviews. So if you were to take a test with someone else, one, you might not see the same question, and two, even if you see it, you will not see the same answers in the same order. But the correct answer is always, of course, the correct answer.
Yeah, no more sharing test answers between people. I know how that goes. I was a cop. I get it. You're not going to be able to do that. But the other thing too is you take a seasoned officer and a new officer, and you can actually bring them together on their learning level very quickly. And that is amazing that you can do that.
Absolutely. And we notice this trend of as people take more cards, they have less cards to take, because the system has a broader and broader understanding of where comprehension lies and how often to repeat it. So over time, spending small amounts of time will keep their comprehension high versus spending large amounts of time every single time.
Yeah, let's go through a couple of questions. We got quite a few. So the first one is, will Recall be available for a live demo at the conference next week? Absolutely. All three of us are going to be at Ignite. Find
Yes.
one of us. We would love to talk to you about Recall. And there's going to be a couple sessions on that. Do you remember offhand the time and day of the Recall sessions?
There are two sessions on Recall. The first one is on Tuesday at 1, I think it's 1:30 to 2:15. And the second one is on Thursday in the morning at 9:45 a.m.
Great. And next question, and I believe this is related to how you were highlighting, is the policy a PDF? The beauty is the PowerPolicy kind of converts your document to a PDF in the viewer. But what file types? There's quite a few file types that you can load into here that will interact with Recall. Could you go over those, Robin or Abhishek?
Absolutely. So we support pretty much every text-based file type. So PDF, Doc, DocX, Word, PPT, PPTX, also PowerPoint, Excel spreadsheets. So pretty much anything that is only text we support. We have not yet supported images and video formats, but certainly something we're looking at. And AI is moving faster than we are, and we definitely want to keep up and bring those capabilities into our product.
And another great question, can this be used to create tests for courses? I know we hear that a lot, and the short answer is not at the time, but I'll let Abhishek add a little more context to that.
Yeah, great question. So this is certainly something that's on our roadmap. And this is a pretty new product, and we're just kind of humbled by the amount of different ways that our customers want to use them. But today, if I think today the workaround would be you could sort of take the question separately and put it in the tests. But in the long term, we certainly want to bring those capabilities into our training products more full-fledged, so you can kind of the effort you're spending here will be usable in other products as well, but it's not at this time.
Yeah, and the other question about, does it only have to be generated from a policy? And the easy answer is no. Anything you have loaded in policy, any kind of document that's loaded, you can generate cards off of. Robin, what's a couple of examples we've talked about you're seeing folks use this to generate cards off of?
And I have a place in the presentation later where we'll talk about it in more detail, but just one is trial preparation, loading in a copy of a report or information to prepare people for trial. Another one is that, and he kind of went over this in the example, but is that promotional process is grueling, and so being able to load documents in the system and then create cards for your employees to help them study for tests, that's been another huge use case.
Yeah, and another question, as your policies change, if you remove a section from the policy and I have a linked card to it, what's going to happen?
Great question, and something I almost forgot to bring up. So when policies are revised, the system will automatically flag every card associated with that policy. And I typically don't do this, but let me just see if Like, so this is the policy. We've created several cards out of this policy. So for the sake of speed, I will just publish this as a new revision. And then I have a series of published cards associated with this policy, or draft cards for that matter. And then when I go into either the draft or the published card, the system will automatically tell me that the card is not up to date because the underlying policy has been revised. If the card had been published, it will flag these statements and show you that these cards need to be revised. But it's all dynamic. So for example, if you have published a few cards, sent them out for assignments, and there are different personalized sequences across your end users, when the policy is revised, we will automatically take all of the linked cards out of circulation and move them to a different status called pending review. And that's really and notify administrators, of course, that we want you to take another look at this card and then either republish it because nothing has changed about this topic, or archive it and you can go create a new card. At this point, it sort of flags everything associated with the policy. We are working in the future of making it a lot more granular because we have that line level link between cards and policies.
So the simple answer is I don't have to remember if I made a change to my policy, or if the person that manages training is different than the person that manages policy, we're going to be notified. The system's going to do it for us. And based on another question, I want to clarify, you do have to have policy. So if you're currently a NeoGov customer and don't have policy, you do have to have policy to be able to utilize recall. And it's not currently available on the unified dashboard, but that is definitely in future plans, and we are working towards that, but not today. And then a real quick one, well, we have a couple more, but let's move on to the rest of what y'all have to show us, and we'll get to the rest of the questions later.
Thank you, Christina. Great questions, everybody. Please keep them coming. The last section I want to talk about is reports. Of course, when it comes to reports, the more the better, the more granular, the more valuable. And we're very aware that nobody has the time to go hunt down all this data about how things are going. It's pretty easy to get to reports. There's a couple of different ways. One, when you're inside of Recall, again, Recall through the double card icon, you can just quickly click on analytics at the product level. You can click on analytics at the deck level and even at the card level. So a couple of very flexible ways for you to get to reports. But worst comes to worst, you can always go into your PowerDMS reports and you'll find a new PowerRecall tab. Now, there's a few different really powerful canned reports, and I'll walk through a couple of these today. The first one is the deck overview report. Now, once you have a different topical spaces created, it's really important to understand, well, overall, across all of the topics I want people to improve comprehension on, where do they lie? And in this test site, of course, it's 20%, but in general, it's a lot higher because, again, people are re-reviewing these materials and they've already read the policies. But it, of course, shows you a trend over time if things are moving up, moving down, or staying flat. And you can try to investigate sort of where this might be happening. A couple of ways to do that, of course, is looking at individual topical spaces. So you could say, well, overall, it's about 20%. So can you tell me a little bit about what it is for the all policies and procedures? And it'll kind of bring up that information, and you can see that. You can also see, are people engaging with this material? Are people taking cards from this particular topic, week over week, month over month? How many active users have been there? And how many cards have been reviewed. As you publish more and review more, this data will start to really kind of zone in on where there might be problem areas and a really deep dive on where there might be value. This and all reports in Recall provide robust filtering. So you can look at, for a particular deck, you can look at it, the entire thing for a particular user. You can look at it for a particular group and then in a particular time range. All of the reports provide these specific filters and more to make sure that at any point you can go granular and look at any individual group, user, or deck. The next report I want to show you is one of my favorite reports. So this one, we built with the early adopters to help understand like who are really the best performers and who might need some additional support. Now, with the leaderboard report, you can actually, it presents data on individual users. So across all of the scores, who has the highest score? And right now, of course, I'm not filtering by a particular topic, user, or group. And then similarly, who has the highest engagement, right? So the people that have the highest engagement have the highest opportunity to improve their scores. So you can also look at who's taking a lot of cards and who's taking very little. We also provide automatically the ability to look at this at the group level, and you can of course filter to a small set of groups to understand where are all these scores, where is all this engagement, who's kind of taking on the work, and who might be needing some additional support and clarity on sort of what needs to be done. And really understanding who the high performance are and then who might require extra support. The next report and the next two reports really, I think some of our customer favorites and really were instant hits when we launched them. The first one is the cards taken heat map, and heat maps are a great way to visualize large quantities of information. Now you have, let's say, hundreds of users or really a large number of users, and you've created a variety of different decks and you've assigned them out, and with personalized scheduling, people take it at different times. And then you've set an expectation of, I want you to take 10 cards a week or 20 cards a week. This cards taken heat map really gives you that one visual to say, hey, Abi, you've taken your cards on the week of the 29th, but only 6 on the week of the 5th. And then you can sort of try to understand what might be going on. Maybe this person was on vacation, or potentially they missed a week. Cards will roll over, they won't double up, really to make sure we always focus on not overwhelming people. So really, as you look at the past in a snapshot, understanding where was the effort, where was the time spent, and if that's happening. And I'm going to go to the last report. And really, if this is a view of, are people taking enough cards? And again, if you take enough cards, the comprehension goes up. Another map is like, where is the comprehension? Right, so we have created this really nicely color-coded chart that shows you for every individual and across every topic space you're interested in, where does that comprehension lie based on all the cards that have been distributed and sent over to them. So you might be able to say, hey, for the DOR subject, everyone's pretty close to 100%, and as an organizational level, we're doing really well. Whereas for the arrest procedures, there are some people that have some gaps. And this is really not a, hey, let's kind of catch this person. And it's really more of a, maybe they need additional training. Maybe we can provide them hyper-specific training on that topic. And before recall, it was really hard. We heard from customers to identify which topics needed more support, and they did generalized training across all users. So the person who knew everything about arrest procedures spent the same amount of time learning it, like the person who might know little. And you can create, since decks are infinitely flexible, you can create new hire decks, you can create promotional decks, you can really understand in those cohorts, job roles and categories, is comprehension remaining high? And as soon as it dips, you can try to sort of mitigate and manage that with remedial training. And hopefully this gives you a really good idea of the comprehensive reporting tools that Recall provides. There's a couple more that I didn't go to today. And I hope this demonstration as a whole gives you a really thorough understanding of the powerful capabilities of Recall. I'm again happy now to take any questions you have about reporting, the product, or really anything else you would like to learn more about.
Abhi, I think what is so amazing is that heat map and that visual at a glance to kind of know where to focus your training. I don't know of any other software or any other tool where you can tell how people's comprehension level is on a specific topic or a policy. I mean, this is, to me, groundbreaking. When you have such critical jobs like healthcare, public safety, for them to know that policy in that moment, how important that is, I think it's really amazing.
Thank you, Ramin. And I of course, want to give a shout out to our beta customers who were instrumental in helping us understand what problems they're facing. And at NeoGov and at PartyMS, we've always cherished feedback, both good and bad, to make the products better. And a lot of what you get to see today is because they told us these directions are more valuable, and we were able to go there.
Absolutely. So we're going to move into kind of what are some things that we found in our beta testing with people. So on the next slide, we have, just some different areas. And the one that I like the most, Abhi, was my users think it's fun. So we found that it really was driving their engagement with PowerPolicy and getting in the system, learning the policies and procedures. They thought it was an exciting new way to learn. And some of them said it sparked some competitiveness within their employees to see, I want a higher score than this person, because it's just a competitive nature in us, right? So that was really cool. They liked that it boosted their creativity because it gave them question options and answers that they hadn't really thought of including. And they were like, oh, well, that's a really good idea. I think I will leave that question in there. I wasn't going to ask that, but yay. Then we also had some that they were getting creative within their agency on how people were using it. And it was driving their engagement to the point that they were giving incentives and awards to people, maybe a Starbucks gift card for who was the most engaged this month, or, who had the most improved recall score. And so I thought that was really cool. It helps with your culture in your business area, whether it's, public safety, whether it's healthcare, whatever, to kind of get people involved in the process. The other thing that we talked about with our beta customers was having that full administrative control. So it wasn't like AI generated cards and they were stuck, right? They could actually take that data and edit it and make the cards their own. They also liked that it was very secure because we have an enterprise license. We do not use our any of the data that customers have in their system to train the AI models. So it's not used. So nobody externally is going to see that that was your policy and it's going to train an AI model to help somebody else do something nefarious. So that was an important thing. They're not paying by the card, right? So you're unlimited in your subscription. When you pay for this and you add it to PowerPolicy, you can create as many cards as you want. We're not charging by card. We're just doing it simply license-based like we do policy. And there's no limits on how many cards you can create, right? So you're not just limited to, oh, I have this, training that I'm going to deliver and I can only do one question. The other part is that they were able to have that full control. They didn't have to get with developers to help them or anything. So it's just so simple to use, it's easy to use, and it gives them a lot of flexibility. Now, on the next slide, I'm going to go over some possible use cases, and we talked about a few, so I won't spend a whole lot of time here. The promotional process, we talked about trial prep, but job skills. So let's focus in on the job skills. You've got somebody going into a new role or a special team. So think of like in law enforcement, K9, in healthcare, maybe they're going to be on the rapid response team, within the hospital or something. So when they're preparing for that new role, you could give some cards out for people that are interested in the role, see how they perform. We did have a customer say that they were going to use recall scores and information from the analytics to maybe help boost somebody in a promotional process. So if they spent time reviewing those policies, procedures, did well on their test, and they see that they were heavily engaged in that process, that might give them another point or two in that promotional process. So that was really cool. And then some are just simply going to use it for study guides. They just want the material studied and reviewed for any number of use cases really within a study guide. So it was really nice to see. And then moving on to the next slide. So how can you use recall within your organization? So we've talked about some of the use cases, individualized learning paths, you're identifying policy deficiency. So what we had is we had a customer that actually had a policy in the system. They used it to create cards. They sent the cards out, and then they got calls and emails saying, hey, this is wrong. So they thought it was the AI. It turned out it wasn't the AI. They had actually changed some operational processes, but hadn't updated their policy. So it was a way for them to get some information from their employees to say, hey, you need to update this. So that was really good. We have some that are going to use it for like special events or seasonal work. They're going to send out decks just to prepare for those. Like they talked about what's the word?
Control.
Protests, like protest season coming up, so that they can prepare them for what their internal procedures are for that and send that out. And then I've already talked about the quality assurance on your training to make sure that your training and your policies and everything is matching up. So I think those are really cool. So on the next slide, I would like you to put in the chat, are there ways that you can think of, maybe we sparked your interest today, and something that we haven't covered on how you think you could use PowerRecall. So Christine, I would love to hear if you've got people putting in the chat, how do they plan to use PowerRecall if they could be king for the day and get it for their department or their organization? What's something we haven't covered that they thought they might be able to use it for?
Yeah, while we're waiting for some items to come in, there's a few that have come in. I want to shift for a minute because, you know, we're coming to the top of the hour. If this is something you're interested in, you can scan this QR code and we're going to drop a link. If you'd like to get pricing, we'll reach out to you directly and go ahead and get you a quote. It is based on your FTE count. So that's how we price it. But as Robin said, you get unlimited cards to use however you'd like. But a lot of great ideas here. It sounds like stuff around foreign diplomats and counselors. I'm not saying that right. We've got hurricane preparedness, you know, emergency operations are a couple of the ideas here as well. And yeah, I want to make sure we have time for Q&A though. If we can shift into that for a minute.
Sure. And just real quick, just so everybody knows, you will be getting a copy of the recording and the slides. I'm also going to include, or it's going to be included on that email that you're going to get a copy of the white paper that I wrote, Transforming Training Through Innovation, and then a use case handout. So just know that those are also going to be coming to you, and we can shift right into Q&A.
Yeah, and I'll leave this up while we're doing the Q&A. One other question we have before we run out of time, can you add images to the card for visual learning reinforcement, or are the cards presented in text only?
At this time, they're text only, but that's definitely something we're looking into. And before long, we want to make it as flexible as possible, just like every other aspect of recall. But it's on the roadmap.
And I think it's important to point out, this is a newer product. We launched it in July, but that doesn't mean, you know, it's got the bumps of a new product. We've had quite a few customers using it. Thousands of cards have already been created. Abhishek, there's been questions about who's already using it. I didn't know if you offhand could drop a couple of names or states that we're already seeing using this new tool.
Yeah, so we have a mix of law enforcement and 911, like Cincinnati 911 is one of our customers, and then law enforcement departments of just varying sizes, all the way from 100 to 500 employees. I think one thing we're noticing is that the product is just universally flexible because the decks are your own creation, the policies come from you. So it really acts as a feeder ground for things that you are going to do and on top of things you've already done before. So there's really no restriction on who can use it, but it seems to really be taking off a little bit more so on law enforcement and 911 at this point.
Just got another great idea someone had in the chat, using it to break down the focus in on the code of conduct within their policy. So focusing on areas that HR might be struggling with the most within, you know, employee retention and compliance. I love that idea. So wanted to share that as well. And then another question for you all. We have a lot of accredited, you know, CALIA state accredited agencies. I know some of the questions have been, they use a policy test as proof of compliance. Can this replace that? Robin, I want to turn this question over to you. Can this replace the test when they need that proof of compliance for policy, or what does that look like?
Right, so I would say that probably wouldn't replace, but it would enhance. So the test is an important part to say at this moment in time, we covered this material, they knew everything that we covered during that time. What recall does is allow you to expand on that knowledge, right? And to create more cards, because you can only create a limited number of test questions for the actual test in that moment, right? But you can create an unlimited number of cards that they can continue to study throughout the year. And then with the heat map and the other scoring and the analytic tools that we have, you could download a copy of that report and then attach that with your proofs as just an additional layer, you know, because there's different levels of compliance. There's, you know, I read and signed the policy, I took a test, but then when you get that higher level of, you know, actually proving a higher level of compliance, I think Recall is beautiful for being able to do that for our departments. But I wouldn't say it replaced it, it's just a way to enhance it.
Great, thanks for providing that clarity. And it looks like more just a comment left. Can we have these heat maps and some of the other Power products? Abhishek will have to see. If you could talk,
you created a monster.
Yeah, and yeah, if you're interested in pricing, got another question about it, please scan the QR code. If you fill out the form, or there's also, we're going to drop the URL in the chat. You just click on that, fill out the form. Somebody's going to reach out to you, give you a call, email, and set up a time to go over the pricing. Again, it's not based on cards you create, but it's based around your FTE. Well, that's all we've got on the agenda today. Thank you everyone for your participation. Thank you, Abhishek, Robin. We appreciate your expertise, and be on the lookout. You'll get a recording. You'll get that nice white paper that Robin mentioned in that use cases document. But we appreciate the participation and so glad to have everyone on the call today. So thank you and have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you
everybody.
so much. Come find us at Ignite.
Yes, we'll be there.
We'll see you there.
Bye-bye.